All right, everyone. I did a earlier video on Lightroom editing bear photo, and I know quite a few of you wanted me to do a bird photo as well. This one's going to be an eagle. It's a picture I took, I think it was last winter. I really liked it then, and I've done a few different edits of it, and we'll see what happens this time. This is the original photo. Kind of hard to see the bird right now, but it's the guy titled it Cliff Dweller. It's an eagle on a cliff, immature bald eagle. So this is the raw photo. We're going to go ahead and develop. I do apologize. My computer is going to be kind of slow here with all these programs running, but here we go. Temperature. This was a morning shot, kind of a golden hour, really warm sun. So we're going to go ahead and adjust the temp slider here towards the warmer side. Get some of those lovely golds and oranges showing through. All right, so here's the bird. And then this is just kind of stick background. I'm going to crop it down just a little bit. Bird is looking that way. That's about right. Keep that rule of thirds going. Okay, now zoom in on the eye and you can see that light was really glinting off its eye really nicely. So there you go, 3:1. Just going to enhance that just a little bit. So I'll go to my adjustment brush, go to size, get down to a pinpoint, do this, so you can see it really illuminated that little pinpoint of light. I'm going to adjust the exposure slider up and the highlight slider up. And you can kind of see in this picture it was almost like a flare of light across the eye. I'm going to go and do I still have this selected here, this adjustment brush. So I'm just going to go, it's still active, I'm going to go and widen it a little bit out there. And I'm just going to go through it. Just made one swipe in each direction. Okay, done with that. Zoom back out. Oh yeah, see, it's a real crisp white dot in its eye now, which is great. I'm gonna go right back to the eye. Like I said earlier in the last video, the eye is really the most important part of a wildlife video, in my opinion. So we're gonna go ahead and do another adjustment brush and just clean up that eyelid and this segment around the eyeball here. Kind of the eyelid here, and just sharpen that up a tiny bit. So go to size, we'll make that quite a bit bigger. This auto mask is still checked. I keep that checked all the time, and what you'll see is it kind of it keeps the adjustment brush in a border. So I'm going to do this kind of yellow border here first. And I'm just holding the button down on my mouse while I scan through this. I'll do this eyelid here. Okay, here's where I started. I'll hover over that, and you can see all that pink area, red area is what's selected for the adjustment I'm going to do. So there's that. I'm going to go up and I'm going to add a tiny bit of saturation because it should be more of an orange-yellow color. So bump that up. It's starting to come through. Do a little bit of clarity, a little bit of contrast, and a little bit of sharpness. If you go too high on the sharpness, see, it gets really grainy, so we're going to just do a little bit, maybe about 10. Click done, zoom back out. Okay, now what I'm going to do is my general settings here. I always like to go to highlights, back them down. Sometimes all the way, sometimes not quite. And I go to shadows, bump them up. I usually bump shadows up quite a bit because I can go back into this contrast slider and get like 24 on the contrast. Really made a nice contrast and darkened it back up. Okay, I'll play with my exposure just a little bit. There we go. I bumped it up a little bit, 0.36. And I'll check my whites. A lot of this is just trial and error. I'm going to raise the whites a tiny bit, 12. And I usually bump the blacks down. These feathers are kind of a chocolate brown on this particular animal, but we've got some shadows and things in the rocks, in these bushes here that could stand to be darkened a little bit. So we'll hit the blacks down. About 19. Clarity up just a tiny bit, 12. Okay, now here's the thing with this particular picture. The color of its head and these feathers really are the same color as this salmonberry bush and this grass here. So I'm going to zoom in. Oops, go 1:1. And really look at this edge of its head. And what I'm going to do is do another adjustment brush, and I'm going to try to separate this. So we have a new adjustment brush. We're going to go down to size, make it fairly large. I'm just going to go over this head. Go over this and hover it. I did go off a little bit here, the adjustment, or the mask, the auto mask didn't quite segregate that properly, but actually I'll show you. We're going to go back over here and we're going to go in our history. We're going to go back to clarity. See, this last action I did was to add the brush stroke, which was this. And I don't like the way that turned out, so we're going to go to clarity, and that removed that brush stroke. So I went back in my history and just backed up. The nice thing about Lightroom is it doesn't make any permanent changes. You can always go back. So we'll try this again. Adjustment brush. And I'm just going to be a little more careful here along this edge. There's just not enough contrast for the auto mask to work properly. I'm going to make it smaller and then go back here where I skipped over, do these little feathers. I'll go hover over that point. The black point is the active one. That's better. Go size up again. It did miss some of this. So go back over this again. Okay. So what we're going to do, add a little contrast. Now you can see it is darkening it, but it is making it a nice contrast from this background. So as long as we don't go too dark, should be okay. I did turn it up quite a bit. So I'm going to click done and zoom back out. And that did make it kind of pull away from the background a little bit, so pretty good. I'm going to move on to the talons and the feet here, because that's another detail that is really cool, and it draws a lot of people's attention to it, and those little details. So do a new adjustment brush, go down in size a little bit, and I'm just going to do these talons here. Those are black on this bird. So I don't want to kill the detail, but let's see what it did. A little bit more here. I don't want to kill the detail, but I want them black and I want them sharp because they're sharp and black. Okay, let's bump the contrast. Ooh, nice. And the clarity just a bit. That's nice. Since we're zoomed in on this foot, we'll go and do the yellow part. Another adjustment brush. We'll go make it larger. We'll do some of this detail here on the top. These scales on the foot. It's already got a nice color. That yellow-orange color is pretty true to life. So I don't think we'll mess with the saturation or anything, but let me see what I highlighted here. Quite a bit. I want these little white highlights to pop. So we'll bump those up a tiny bit. Shadows down. That's nice. It's really making those scaly, the scaly feet texture stick out. We'll do a little contrast. Very nice. All right, done. Zoom back out. I'm going to zoom on the other foot and do that. Onto the claws, the talons. Make this a little bit bigger. This adjustment brush here, the similar size. Kind of went wild on the second one. Ooh, I went off. I'm going to go back. That should remove that. I'll try that again. I'll try to stay within the lines this time. Okay, this should be better. That'll work. Contrast. Shadows back. A little bit of clarity. Good. Do another one for the scaly foot here. A little bit on the top. A little bit on the toe. A little bit here. A little bit here. See how that looks. Hover over the active dot. Pretty good. And we'll do a little bit more here. Each time you can go over the same spot more than once and it like adds it. Just like makes it even, the more times you go over it, the more effect your adjustment will have on it. Make sure we got it. Yeah, that looks good. So a little bit highlights up. Be 15, shadows down. 15, contrast up. Quite a bit, maybe 30, 31. This is all subjective. It's all up to you, what you think looks best. Okay. So we're here. We've got some really nice detail in the feathers. I need to do the beak. I think I'll do the beak next. So we'll zoom in on that. This is almost kind of blown out. I don't know if it's just slightly overexposed or what's going on with it. Maybe it's just a really pale one. Not a lot of feather right there, so it kind of reflected the light. In real life, this is quite a bit darker in here. So I always do like this lips here. This little ring around the base of the bottom beak. This crest here, it's like where the beak sheath connects to the skull. We'll do that. We'll add some contrast to darken it. Let's see if we can, oh yeah. Nice. And we're going to take down the highlights. Much better. I'm going to also do this a little bit more around the eye. Good. Done. I'm going to do another one. I'm going to do this real bright spot right here. I just don't like the way it looks, so size is fine. Just holding the button down on the mouse and scribbling over this white spot. So I think I'm going to take down the highlights. Go ahead down to here, take down the highlights. There we go. Add some contrast. Oop, too much. Drop the shadows down too. That should make these darker hairs stand out. Exposure down a tiny bit and clarity up. Oh, no. I'm not going to take clarity up, it just makes it too bright. A little more contrast. I'm up 43 on the contrast. And we're going to bump the sharpness too. Tiny bit, 17. Okay, done. Now I want to work on this beak, and I want to kind of this one's I don't know, it's kind of a funky colored beak on this bird, being a juvenile. Generally they're darker, but I'm going to go ahead and trace this out. We're just going to add some contrast to that and try to separate it from the background. Of this funky kind of pasty white colored part, which is normally black. Not sure what's up with this one, if it was partially the way the light hits it, or if it actually was that color in person, but contrast it. Take some highlights out. Shadows. There we go. Actually gonna take the exposure down a tiny bit too. Out there, 14. All right, done. Zoom back out. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Really pulled a lot of detail out of the beak. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna try something here. I'm gonna use what's called a graduated filter. I use this quite a bit on landscapes, not as much on wildlife photos, but I want to try to darken this background here on top a little bit. So I'll go to here, click my mouse and hold it down, and then just drag this way. Nope, we're not going to do that, sorry. I'm going to do a radial filter. So to get rid of that, I'm going to go back to my history over here and go back one step, and that should, okay, that removed that. So we're going to do radial filter. Go radial filter, put the cursor kind of in the middle, and then hold the button down and drag. So I made it this oval shape. Go up to the line, it gives you a little arrow. That means you can kind of tilt it with that. So I'm going to tilt it, let go, and come down here, grab the whole thing, move it this way. So we've kind of surrounded the bird here. Hover over that. Pretty good. Come down here and turn the feather down, is it? Yep, I'm going to turn the feather down. And that just makes this edge here, if you turn the feathering up, it kind of fades further. If you turn the feathering down, it doesn't fade as much, so it makes a little more dramatic of a line. But let's go up here, bump the exposure down. That's pretty good. I still have this to deal with, but it did kind of darken that background, which is nice. We'll try that. Done. See, now this bird is still lit up. The background is not quite as much. I'm gonna move over to this grass here. This tuft of grass is like very similar colored to the rest. So I've got new adjustment brush. Auto mask is on. I'm gonna just go right over this grass here. Okay, hover over it, see what it, yeah. Bump up the contrast, turn down the highlights. There we go. And that really kind of faded this off into the background. So I'll click done. Oh, that's pretty nice. I'm going to do a little bit of work on these leading edges of the wings, a little bit in the chest here, maybe a little bit on the under wings, and then we'll call it done. Once again, another adjustment brush. Good size here. We're going to go do this wing edge. It's already really clear. I really like the focus on this shot, but we're going to make it even better because we can. Okay, I'll see what I highlighted here. Looks good. Add some contrast. 13. A little bit of clarity. Ooh, yeah, that's nice. Go up to 20. 22, I guess, and we're going to add some sharpness. 15. New one. Do this under wing section here. It's pretty good, but I'd like to make it better. Color that one up. Let's see what it highlighted. Good. Okay, I want to try to keep that chocolate color. Add a little bit of clarity. That's pretty good. I'll bump the shadows up a tiny bit, brighten those up. Highlights really aren't doing much. Maybe a little bit on this, on these lighter sections here. Contrast. I'll try exposure just a tiny bit. Lightened them up. Sometimes exposure with contrast will give you a slightly different look. Sometimes it's counterproductive though. That looks pretty good. Turn that back down a little. It's about right. I want to just do this chest area here and a little bit on the chin. Other one about the same size here. It's pretty good. We'll see what that highlighted. Really a lot of lights mixed with darks here, so that auto mask doesn't fill everything. It's pretty good. Again, a little bit of contrast. It's almost kind of a muddy color right there. Kind of blah, so we're going to just pop the contrast a little bit and some clarity. Ooh, that looks nice. Done. And I'm going to do one more over the whole eye. Get that clear and sharp. You want that thing as sharp as you can without looking, you know, without looking fake. So clarity. Wow, quite a bit of clarity. That looks pretty good. Do a little bit of contrast to try to get a good solid clean line there. That's nice. And then I'm going to bump the sharpness up. Now zoomed in like this, it will show some grain. So you have to bump it up until you start seeing some noticeable grain. Let it done, and then zoom back out and see how it looks. That looks fine. Do one more over the whole kind of face. right over everything. And bump the sharpness. Now with all these little adjustment brush points all over everything, it is honestly pretty hard to see. So just adjust it. I went way up to 38. Remember where that adjustment point was, right there. See, that looks fine. I think that's pretty good. If you really wanted to get crazy, you could go along, do some contrast along this, along these little feathers. I mean, you can take this super far if you want to. I sometimes feel like I over edit anyways, so I'm not going to mess with this. I'm totally happy with this. Your eye is drawn to the eye of the eagle and its face. It's got a nice crop. You know, unfortunately this wing got cut off, but is what it is. I'm pretty happy with it now. One final thing, I'm going to go back to the exposure and bump it up a little bit. Let's see how bright I can get away with. Maybe not quite that bright. I want to keep a nice even look between many different computer screens and mobile devices. This computer tends to show things brighter than they are on other screens. So I always go one more visit to the exposure before I leave it to make sure that it'll be pleasing both on this computer and on my iPhone. My iPhone tends to be a little bit darker than this computer. So there it is. There's my finish. I'm going to show the raw photo and the final edit in my post, and be sure to ask questions if you have any. Sorry for being so long-winded, but hopefully this helps somebody out. Thanks for watching.